Hi, Sophia. Okay, so we are at the very last plague. We are about to see what happens. So remember, we've been through, let's see if we can name them all. The blood in the Nile, the flies, the hail, the locusts, boils, plague on the livestock, darkness for 3 days. What am I forgetting? Did I say frogs? Because there's frogs. Anyways, we're at number 10. And remember, God has warned them, and because the Pharaoh is angry, and he keeps trying to negotiate. He's like, "Oh, you can leave, but only your men." And Moses is like, "Not good enough." And he's like, "Okay, your people can go, but all the animals have to stay." And Moses is like, "We're actually gonna leave with more than we came with. How about that?" And when Pharaoh finally gets angry, really angry, and he says, "I don't want to see you again. Like, the next time I see you, it's gonna be the end of you." And Moses is like, "All right, I'm gonna play the trump card then. Here's what God has planned for you if you don't straighten up in the next 24 hours. The first born child in every family, from the highest, from your child, Pharaoh, who's gonna be the heir, who would be the next Pharaoh, all the way down to the lowest person, and all of the firstborn livestock, so we're about to take out a bunch of your animals, is going to die. This is what you've brought on yourself." And we want to be super clear. This is not just God being like, "I love to hand out punishments." Because God doesn't. He has tried everything that would not harm people, that would just be enough of a wake-up call. But Pharaoh is dug in his heels and does not want to let the slaves go because his ego is in the way. He wants the money that the slaves make. He's not having to pay anything for them. So this is where we see God's like, "I'm really not playing around about this, and justice matters. The way you treat people matters, and you're about to just reap what you have sown. This consequence, Pharaoh, you chose this," is God's message here. So, we start out in chapter 12 now. "The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, 'This month is to be for you the first month of your year.'" Notice he's changing the whole calendar for them. He's like, starting from here on out, this marks a new age for you, a new beginning. You're even going to change the way you count time. "Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share with their nearest neighbor, having taken into account the number of people there are. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the people of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the house where they eat the lambs. That same night they are to eat the meat roasted over the fire, along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw or cooked in water, but roast it over the fire, head, legs, and inner parts. Do not leave any of it until morning. If some is left till morning, you must burn it. This is how you are to eat it, with your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. On that same night I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn, both men and animals, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. This is a day you are to commemorate. For the generations to come you shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance." Okay, so this is how, at the same time he has given a threat to Egyptians, he is offering protection to Israel. He says, when the angel of death comes, they need to know to skip your houses. The angel of death isn't going to be able to tell Egyptians from Israel. So what you do is you take this lamb and you keep it in your house. Why do you think you keep it in the house? I think you keep it in the house for those few days because, in a way, he's saying this is going to cost you something, Israel. Your freedom doesn't come free. It's going to cost you something. The lamb stays in the house with you because you're going to get a little bit attached to it. Your kids are going to want to name it. So that when you have to kill the lamb, it's a sacrifice for you. It costs you something. It's something you're not happy about. But God doesn't waste anything. You're going to eat the lamb. This is going to be dinner for you guys. But you're also going to smear the blood over the doors. And that's how the angel of death, when the angel of death sees that blood, he will know, pass over that. That's where the name comes from. Pass over that house. Don't take the children in that house. That house is covered. And you notice the other instructions he gives them. He says, if there's someone who doesn't have a lamb, you share. People need to take care of each other. Don't just worry about your own family. You worry about your neighbor. You take care of your neighbor. You help. If they can't afford a lamb or they don't have a lamb, you share that with them. And he gives them instructions. He says you're going to eat them with bitter herbs and with bread without yeast. Now you've made bread. So you know what happens if you leave the yeast out of bread. It doesn't rise. It's just flat, right? These are going to become symbols that are important for Passover, which God is already telling them, this is something you're going to do every year to remember this. So the bitter herbs are going to be to remind you of the tears you shed in Egypt, of the bitterness and the hardness of the pain and the torture you went through as slaves. He is saying, I don't want you to forget this experience. I want you to carry this with you, because what we're going to see later all through the Bible is that God will constantly tell the Israelites, once they're on their own and they're their own country, he's going to say, welcome the stranger, be kind to the outcast, because remember that you were slaves once in Egypt. He doesn't ever want them to forget that, because he doesn't want them to forget that and start acting like the Egyptians and start exploiting other people the way they were exploited. So he said, so you're going to do this ritual that reminds you of how hard it was to be a slave, how bitter it was, so that you will never treat people the way that you have been treated. And you're going to eat bread with no yeast, because this needs to be bread you can make fast. Yeast, if you're going to put it, it takes time to rise, right? You have to wait for the bread to rise. There's no time for that. He's saying, this is fast, guys. So you're going to make bread that doesn't have time to rise, so it's just going to be super fast. And why do you think he says, eat it with your shoes on and with your when he says your tunic or your cloak tucked into your belt, it means you are dressed and ready to go. Because when this happens, Pharaoh's going to be so upset that he's going to send you out, and you need to be ready to go at a moment's notice. So you are basically in your traveling clothes. You got everything that you need. You are ready to hit the road the moment that he says you can go. So we are seeing this is the setup for God's sort of final show, when he's like, it's not that God wants to do this, but he says, but you're going to remember this, and Egypt is going to remember this. They brought this on themselves, but you are protected because you're the ones I'm trying to save. I also wanted to save Egypt. We want to be so clear about that. God gave Egypt every chance for the Pharaoh to save his own people. And he's saying now everyone in Egypt is going to pay this cost because of Pharaoh. And it sucks that their bad leadership means that the regular people are going to suffer. But this is the only way that the people will be upset enough and that the Pharaoh will be upset enough to finally let you go. This is going to be the cost of freedom.